Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare कमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं चाक्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं त्वं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवम् श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सगन ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare
Padakamalang Sri Gurun Vaishnavansha Sri Rupam Chakrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam त्वं सजीवम् शाद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवम् श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सगन ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the service.
Thank you, Prabhuji. What's your name?
Suman.
Suman.
Yeah, yours?
Nice. Cyrus.
Cyrus.
Yes.
You remember my name, right? Mohan.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Chakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhu Sahitam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakha Nitanshtam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
So is your mom not coming tomorrow?
Yeah, she's going to finish today.
Oh, yeah, she's already.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Randana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatiya Vanacharya Munatiya Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatiya Vanachari Munatiya Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Shri Radhe Jaya Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai. Hare Krishna. I would like to humbly request the blessings of all the Vaishnavas that I can speak something that may be of use and is not my own concoction. Yes, we're nothing without the blessings of the Vaishnavas. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, entitled Jnana Yoga, verse 42. Atava yoginam eva kule bhavati dimatam etati durlabhatarang loke janmadhyadishram Atava yoginam eva kuli bhavati dimatam etadi durlabhadaram loki janma yadishram. Atava yoginam eva kuli bhavati dimatam etadi durlabhadaram loki janma yadidrasham. Atava, or yoginam, of learned transcendentalists, eva, certainly, kule, in the family, bhavati, takes birth, dimatam, of those who are endowed with great wisdom, etat, this, he, certainly, durlabhataram, very rare, loke, in this world, janma, birth, yat, that which, idrasham, like this. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. Purport. Birth in a family of yogis or transcendentalists, those with great wisdom, is praised herein because the child born in such a family receives a spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. It is especially the case in the Acharya or Goswami families. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters. In India, there are many such Acharya families, but they have now degenerated due to insufficient education and training. By the grace of the Lord, there are still families that foster transcendentalists generation after generation. It is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such families. Fortunately, both our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self had the opportunity to take birth in such families. By the grace of the Lord, both of us were trained in the devotional service of the Lord from the very beginning of our lives. Later on, we met by the order of the transcendental system. Again, the verse. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Gadanmayam Tadanti Swam Vadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purijana Saita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Prayamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhyaneva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitya Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschachade Sitarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Jai. And there we just recited the Mangalacharan, the auspicious invocation prayers. So we seek the blessings of many great personalities, like a spiritual master. In the case of us who are not initiated, we take Srila Prabhupada as our spiritual master. And many different, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, all these different auspicious personalities, we seek their blessings before we give class. I love the Mangalacharan. I love it so much. Jai, I'll repeat the verse one more time. Yes, it's chapter 6, verse 42. I've gone through the Sanskrit and the purport, so I'll just read out the English one more time. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. So I was thinking, just to give a little bit of context, I'm just going to read the translations from a couple of verses before. Because it's 6:42. Yeah. Because Krishna is speaking here in answer to a question from Arjuna. Throughout the Gita, Arjuna asks certain questions and Krishna answers, and he gives the most perfect answers. But Arjuna's questions are also very, very perfect. And especially this question, it resonated with me a lot, especially when I was first reading the Gita. And still now, I have the same question as Arjuna in a lot of the ways. So Arjuna asks this question from verse 37. O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalists, who in the beginning take to the process of self-realization with faith, but later desist due to worldly mindedness and thus do not attain perfection in mysticism? So he's saying, what happens if we go along the path a bit, but don't succeed? You know, there's a goal that we're going for, and many people don't get there. And again, he goes on, he gives this analogy, which sort of terrifies me. He says, O mighty Arn Krishna, does not such a man, who is bewildered from the path of transcendence, fall away from both spiritual and material success, and perish like a riven cloud, with no position in any sphere. So he uses this analogy of a riven cloud. Like a cloud, you have a big cloud, and a little bit comes away. And if it doesn't join back onto another cloud, and this cloud just disperses, it can't survive on its own. Clouds need to be in a mass. And so Arjuna is asking, like, if we engage in the spiritual life, we've got to give up so many material things. And if we don't succeed in spiritual life, then we've simultaneously failed materially and spiritually. And it's quite terrifying. These thoughts, because we try and, Krishna's quite clear, we can't really have the best of both worlds. If we want Krishna, we can't simultaneously seek after material things constantly. So we've got to just go for him, but then if we don't get there, it's quite scary. So Krishna is calming his doubts, basically. So I'll read a couple of verses up to where we get to. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people, or into the family of rich aristocracy. Or, this is our verse, if unsuccessful after a long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists, who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly such a birth is rare in this world. So we see Krishna's dispersing his fears. He's saying, if someone engages in some sort of transcendental, even mystical, it doesn't even need to be devotional activity. Nonetheless, if they're engaged in this path, especially if it's devotional activity, Krishna looks after us, And, okay, we may not get the results in this lifetime, but in the next lifetime, the birth that we get is ordered in such a way. Now, I'm sure if anyone does any introspection, they can realise that the family that we take birth into, the situation, the time, the country, none of these things are completely random. Like you can look at like a mundane example, like obviously the amount of great bands, rock music bands, that have been formed out of people who've gone to school together. Whether it's the Beatles or Radiohead. There's so many different. Radiohead, yeah. But it's like that way that it's not random which personalities get put together, especially with the family that you're put into and things. These things are all directed ultimately from Krishna. And the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of both himself and his spiritual master, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. We can see up here, both these people were born into great families of transcendentalists. Bhaktisiddhanta, who we can see is second from the left, he was born into the family of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, who's on the right. This is his father, the one on the furthest right. And he was in all of these personalities, incredible personalities. Bhaktivedanta Thakur, the father, Prabhupada describes him as the pioneer of the Krishna consciousness movement. Basically, Lord Chaitanya came in the 16th century and boom, this whole spread of the Sankirtan movement, the holy names. But then slowly over time, as is very common in Kali Yuga, everything just gets degenerated. Teachings got lost. It was dismissed as sort of sentimentalism by a lot of the elite, the academia. They sort of saw this movement as nothing more than just sentiment, whereas really it's the highest philosophy. So that was the sort of position that he came into, and single-handedly, despite I think he had the highest position any Indian could have under British rule. He was a magistrate, intensely busy. Whilst doing that, he was writing books and re-establishing Gaudiya Vaishnavism, our philosophy. And he had a vision. He was on the banks in Mayapur, and he had a vision of all these Western devotees chanting and dancing Jaya Satchinandana and these things. And so he knew that he wouldn't be able to fulfill this mission on his own. So he prayed to have a son like the ray of Vishnu. This is what he prayed for. And then yeah, he has maybe 10 children, but one of the children is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is certainly like a ray of Vishnu. He was, even from a very, very young age, there's pastimes of him. Like, I think from the age of 7, he learnt the whole Gita and could explain every verse, like from memory, from the age of 7. Similarly, one time he accidentally ate a mango that wasn't offered, so his father gently told him, no, it's best to offer. But, very gentle, he's a small child. But from then on, didn't eat any mangoes. Another time, like when he was born, the Yathayatra, Lord Jagannath, was being pulled along in these big carts, and they stopped it, and the carts got stuck outside his house for 3 days whilst he was a baby. And as a baby, he crawled up, and he got to take darshan of Lord Jagannath, and the garland supposedly fell on him. So lots of auspicious signs. And you see, he was just an incredible personality, an intellect like nothing else. He was, I think, professor of Sanskrit. He was a tutor to the king and things. But yeah, so he was just an incredible personality, and he sort of further established this whole Gaudiya Vaishnavism from his father. He took over the mantle and set up many centres throughout the world, printed books, got established, and then eventually his disciple Srila Prabhupada, who he met and then instructed to spread it to the West. And similarly, Prabhupada was born into a family of transcendentalists. Prabhupada said, everything I've learnt from my father, apart from how to print books. I learnt that from my spiritual master. So we see how the things that... You'll notice this when you come to spiritual life. It's really interesting. You talk to anyone, the realization is quite similar. That Krishna has been preparing us for a while. Like even in mundane things, like I've noticed, I come here and there's certain services that need to be done. So like, okay, I'll help it in this way. And so I cut the grass. It's very you think it's a mundane thing. But there is the lawnmower we have. My granny, she had exactly the same lawnmower, and it's really specific how to use it. And she wouldn't let anyone use it apart from me. She trained me up how to use this specific lawnmower. I come here, say, oh yeah, I can use this lawnmower. Or like my stepmom, she was incredibly strict about how to clean. I was living at home for a little while before coming here. I'm around to clean and all this dusting and things, and I was not used to it at all. And I come here and it's like, oh, hang on a sec, I'm quite good at cleaning now. And even mundane things, but then also much more esoteric. Krishna's just, he's preparing us. You see what with Prabhupada, the impressions you get as a child are very, very important in developing your psychology. And so that's why Krishna takes such care of his devotees, is that he puts them into a situation which is favourable. But of course, we're thinking, in the West and even in India now, there's not really many actual families of transcendentalists. Where Kali Yuga, things are a bit pear-shaped. Yeah, especially in the line that Prabhupada's talking about, where it's like people who are just complete pure souls, generation after generation. That doesn't really exist anymore. But what's interesting is that Prabhupada said when he came to the West, that his spiritual master he'd sprinkled pure souls in the Western countries to help spread his mission. And you see it because Prabhupada came over and just it took him about a year. But there's these souls who are just full on, they know the philosophy, they're fully practiced and completely devout. And then, after a couple of years they take sannyas. It's not normal. There's people from just seemingly the most mundane backgrounds. And this is explained as they've got different levels of piety. There's an analogy given that we want to be like dry grass. Because when grass is dry, you just have to give it a spark and then it lights. This is what happens. This is when most people come to Krishna consciousness. They're very, very ready. They're drying out the grass and then they just hear the holy name, they taste prasadam or something, and then there's a spark and the fire starts to rage. Now the process of drying out this grass is piety. because it's explained in the Gita, chapter 7:16. It says there's 4 types of people who come, who approach Krishna. There's the distressed. Maybe you can all introspect and work out which ones each of you are. It's quite an interesting question, but he says there's 4. There's the distressed, those in want of material things, the inquisitive, and those searching after absolute knowledge. So these are the 4 people who approach Krishna. Now, thinking about myself, I'm definitely a mix of quite a few. I was definitely distressed, inquisitive, yeah, possibly a mix of all, but there's usually a predominant one. And Krishna says the best is he who's seeking after absolute knowledge, because he's not looking for anything in return. He just wants Krishna, whereas everyone else is seeking, whether it's an alleviation of suffering or whether it's, some esoteric knowledge. They're seeking something in return. But ultimately, Krishna explains whatever we approach him with, whatever desires, he purifies. Because what's really interesting, Prabhupada explains in the purport to that verse, if we have, there's the external situation, like being distressed, where we have, maybe we've lost our job, maybe our family situation is bad. This is the external situation. And depending upon our level of piety, if we're very pious, that distress will lead us towards spiritual life, ultimately towards Krishna. But if our piety is low, then we'll be directed towards material replacements for spiritual life, such as different political movements or ideologies. And you see this, it's so clear. You look at something like communism or some sort of obsession with social activism or whatnot. You see how people have the material external cause is the same. They can see the world's a place of suffering. They can see that something needs to be done, and they have all this. They feel they want to do good for other people, but their piety is not up to such a degree that they can take to spiritual life. So instead, they take to material things, which, maybe it serves a purpose for a short while, but it's not the actual full solution. As tempting as communism is, we can see it's not really worked. I was a communist for a week once, but didn't last. Yeah. So you can see how, even though in the West, or throughout the world, there's not so much of these transcendentalist families, those who are applicable to devotional service, they exhibit the piety beforehand in certain ways. It's very common for people to be vegetarian, and not because some people are vegetarian for intellectual reasons. They say bad for the environment. And these are all valid reasons. There's so many reasons to be vegetarian. But many people will be vegetarian just because that's how it feels to them. It's an emotional thing. And this is a symptom of piety. Yeah. But the scary thing is, Krishna explains, it's explained in Sri Upanishad that Krishna fulfills all our desires. He's described as, actually I'm going to read it. This is one of my favourite mantras. The Sri Upanishad is one of the sort of prominent Upanishads, teachings of the Vedas. And this mantra 8, it's in relation to this. It's quite interesting. In a description of Krishna, he describes him as the self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling everyone's desires since time immemorial. And that's, I'm just going to read a little bit the purport, because it just Prabhupada's purport perfectly explains this idea of inclinations of piety, but then how it applies to taking the spiritual life. And he says, "Thus the Lord does not manifest himself in full to the mental speculators. He can be appreciated only in proportion to one's surrender to him. The fallen condition of the living entities is due entirely to his forgetfulness in the relationship with God." Because according to our surrender unto Krishna, we can actually get to see him. It seems an obvious point, but I'll just go and read a little bit. If a man wants to be a high court judge, he must acquire not only the necessary qualifications, but also the consent of the authority who can award the title of high court judge. The qualifications in themselves are insufficient for one to occupy the post. It must be awarded by some superior authority. The mercy of the Lord is also required. Ordinarily, the living being does not know what to ask from the Lord, nor which post to seek. When the living being comes to know his constitutional position, however, he asks to be accepted into the transcendental association of the Lord in order to render transcendental loving service unto him. It's really interesting. So Krishna has been fulfilling our desires since time immemorial. What it says here, the living entity does not know what to seek. That's the position of most of us. That we have desires, and then they get fulfilled according to our qualification, and ultimately by Krishna's sanction. But until we actually come to desire our constitutional position, then it will just cause more suffering. There's one story. Sutta Prabhupada gave this story. It gets me every time. There's this woman. She has a whole basket of rocks on her head. She has to drag them across this hot and barren desert. She has to drag these rocks on her head, and she's taking steps, and the sweat's dripping down her face. Each step is agony, and she has to drag these rocks. And then she's getting weak, and she stumbles, and the rocks fall across the floor. And she says, "Krishna!" And she cries out with such emotion in her heart that Krishna actually manifests before her. And Krishna said, "I heard your call. You called my name with such sincere need and emotion that I couldn't help but come before you. How can I serve you?" And she says, "Krishna, please put these rocks back on my head." And that's the position we're in, because we've not known what to seek. You know, and Krishna's just fulfilled. He said, "Okay, that's what you want. You want to go to hell? You want to enjoy like an animal? Okay, here's an animal body." You know, but currently we have a human body, and we also have access to these scriptures and saintly personalities. And the purpose of this is to actually cultivate our desires, because, you know, once we desire Krishna, then everything's easy sailing, really. We've got a couple of offences to overcome, but if we just actually desire to serve Krishna, because I was explaining, there's these 4 types of people who approach Krishna. They all have some desire: the distressed, the wanting material things, the inquisitive, and the seeker of absolute knowledge. But Krishna explains that just by approaching him with desires, even if it's for material things, like even you desire a nice house, you approach Krishna and gradually desires get purified. Because it's explained in the 18th chapter of the Gita, the only Bhaktimama Bhajanati Yavam Nyas Tashmi Tatvata, only by devotional service can Krishna be known. Only through unalloyed devotional service can we get to know him. But ultimately, most of us don't have even this desire to know Krishna. But just by approaching him with the desires that we do have, then eventually they get purified. So that's why we chant Hare Krishna. You go in the streets and you see people chant Hare Krishna, be happy. But what we're actually chanting, Prabhupada gave one translation of the mantra. There's many translations, you know. We're referring to Krishna, Radha, different translations, but he gave the most common one. He says, you know, please Krishna, please engage me in your service. Please engage me in your service. And this is what we're chanting over and over again. And even though most of us don't really know this when we're chanting, this is what we're begging. We're begging to be engaged in his service. And eventually, you know, he puts us there. Like, because this is our constitutional position, is to be his servant. So even though we might not have this desire, to just serve Krishna with no care for ourselves, still, we know this is actually what we need to beg for. So we chant every day, and eventually this becomes our desire. And once it's our desire, everything's fulfilled, because we're begging to be placed in the position that we belong. You know, this is our home. Like one of the Shikshastakam prayers, Hayinanda Dhanaja, Ainanantana Jakinkaram Patitamam Vishame Bhava Buddha. Lord Chaitanya is saying, O son Ananda, Krishna, I am your eternal servant, yet somehow or other I've been placed in this ocean of material suffering. Please pick me up and place me as one of the atoms of your lotus feet. And that's our mood, that we just, somehow or other we're here, and we're being confused by so many different desires. We want some opulence, we want some intellect, we want some form of liberation, but we don't know what we want. And therefore Krishna is just letting us continue along in this cycle. Therefore, by chanting Hare Krishna, by reading the scripture, by associating with sadhus, and gradually our desires become focused. We begin focused on Krishna. And yeah, in that verse, 1855, Bhakti mama bhajanati yavam yashtashmi tadvata jaktvato tatamam gyatva vishate tadanantaram. Only by devotional service can one understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is full of such consciousness of me, they can enter into my abode. So we can have so many of our own concoctions of who is God. You know, God's just some energy. God is some collective unconscious. God is impersonal, and all these things are sort of there. They're there because we can't get the higher realization of Krishna, the little blue boy, the flute on the banks of the Yamuna River. Because it's so inconceivable, but because it can only be realized by devotional service. And devotional service is said in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami, Anya Balasita Sunyam Jnana Karma Janavritam. When pure devotional service arises, it's free from any materialistic desire, from any knowledge from monistic philosophy, and any fruit of action. One must serve Krishna constantly as Krishna desires. Like no desire for anything for ourselves. That's pure devotional service. But of course we come to Krishna with all our current desires. But eventually, by chanting Hare Krishna, by engaging in this process, then we get there, hopefully. Fingers crossed, because it'd be really nice. Yeah. So if there's any questions, we can open up for discussion, if anyone has. So if not, I'll maybe just quickly conclude on what I said. I've been told it's nice to give a little summary. So we emphasise that where we take birth is not by chance. The things, especially to do with spiritual life, the opportunities that arise, the conversations we have, the books that randomly appear on our bookshelf, these things are not by chance. The opportunities have arisen due to our piety from previous lives, this lifetime, and from the mercy of devotees, really. But when these opportunities arises, you know, it's so, like, just think about it, like you have a human form of life, you have an interest in spirituality, you have access to so much scripture, so many saintly persons living in the Dham, the deities, everything. The opportunity is there. And this is all, you know, it's so rare. We've got the opportunity, we must grab it. And even though we're impure and have so many other materialistic desires or whatnot, we can just come to Krishna with these. And ultimately over time, he'll sort them out. Whether it means that he'll temporarily fulfill them, whether it means that he'll let us see that this is not what we want, whether it means he'll actually just completely change our desires, that's up to him. But we just have to come towards him. So we chant his names, these desires become purified, and we can actually know him as he is. So that's the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement. That's the purpose of the human form of life, to know Krishna and to serve him. So best get chanting Hare Krishna. Jai. But any comments, questions? Tired? Jai. And traditional Bhagavad Gita ki. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai. Thank you, Professor.